Ethan Cole sat on his porch, the weight of the rifle across his lap more familiar than the rocking chair beneath him. The late summer sky stretched over Montana like a deep, unbroken ocean, but something in the air felt wrong. The wind was too still. The birds had stopped singing. He exhaled, pushing away the instinct to reach for a scope and scan the horizon. His hands, calloused from years of gripping steel and wood, found the familiar weight of his coffee mug instead. He was done with war. He had spent 2 decades serving his country, his hands steady in places where death lurked in every shadow. Now he lived in a town where the biggest problem was a lost dog or a teenager sneaking beer into the woods. It was supposed to be peaceful. But peace had a way of unsettling a man like Ethan. A rusted pickup rattled up the dirt road, sending dust curling into the air. Sheriff Mark Davis climbed out, boots kicking gravel as he shut the door. A man of few words, built like an old oak tree, broad, weathered, and too damn stubborn to break. He leaned against the truck and crossed his arms. "Something's off," Davis said, eyes on the sky. Ethan smirked. "You too?" The sheriff sighed, shifting his weight. "Power outages last night. First I figured a storm knocked something loose, but the sky was clear. Then the phone started acting up. Radios too. Even the damn generator at the station flickered." Ethan set his mug down. "Could be a solar flare." "Could be," Davis said, not sounding convinced. "But Jonah swears he saw lights in the sky. Said they weren't from any plane." "Jonah's half blind and drinks too much," Ethan muttered, but the words rang hollow. A sharp gust of wind carried something acrid on its back, something that didn't belong. Ethan's body tensed before his mind could register why. Old instincts clawed their way to the surface. He set the rifle aside and stood, scanning the tree line. Davis watched him, knowing better than to ask what he was looking for. A distant hum rolled over the hills, low and unnatural. It vibrated through Ethan's ribs, a sound that felt more felt than heard. The hairs on his arms stood up. Then silence. The sheriff exhaled slowly. "That ain't normal." The town sat nestled between rolling hills and dense forest, a quiet place where time moved slow. By midday the diner was always full of the same faces, men who worked with their hands and lived simple lives. The bell over the door jingled as Ethan and Davis stepped inside, greeted by the scent of frying bacon and stale coffee. Jonah sat at the counter, his mechanic's overalls smeared with grease. He turned as they entered, his thick fingers tightening around his mug. "You hear it?" Ethan nodded. "Describe what you saw." "Lights," Jonah said, rubbing his jaw. "Not like a plane. Moved too fast, changed directions on a dime. Thought maybe drones, but they were too damn big." "How many?" "3. Maybe 4. The diner's usual chatter had faded. People were listening. Ethan could feel it, the way unease rippled through the room. The town had never needed to worry about the outside world before. They were tucked away, forgotten. Davis cleared his throat. "Could be military testing. We get that sometimes." Jonah shook his head. "No. This was different." Ethan looked out the window. The street stretched quiet, the sky still open and blue. He wanted to tell himself it was nothing. But war had taught him something about the way silence settled before a storm. It wasn't nothing. The first sign that the world had changed came that night. Ethan stood on his porch, the forest whispering around him. The cicadas had gone silent. A deep hum pulsed in the distance, like the earth itself was breathing. Then a light, blinding and unnatural, split the sky. The ground shook. His heart kicked into a combat rhythm, body moving before thought. He grabbed his rifle and sprinted toward town, his breath sharp in the cold air. Smoke curled above Main Street. A car sat overturned, headlights flickering. The air smelled burned, but not like fire, something metallic, electric. Then he saw them. They stood over the bodies of 2 men, their forms cast in the glow of the streetlights. 7 feet tall, armored in sleek plates that shifted like liquid metal. Their eyes, black and endless, reflected the flames licking at the pavement. Ethan pressed against the wall of a building, keeping to the shadows. He controlled his breathing, steady as ever. The sheriff crouched behind a truck, pistol drawn. But they both knew that wasn't enough. The creatures moved with purpose, scanning the buildings, herding people into the open. They spoke in a language that sounded like grinding steel, gestures sharp and deliberate. One of them lifted a device and a low-frequency pulse swept through the air. The streetlights flickered and died. Ethan's hands clenched around his rifle. Davis met his gaze across the street, jaw tight. This wasn't a random attack. This was something worse. Then one of the creatures turned its head, directly at them. Ethan moved first. Ethan flattened himself against the cold brick as the alien turned, its black eyes reflecting the dying glow of the streetlights. It didn't move right, too fluid, too precise. The way its head cocked, slow and deliberate, sent a cold weight settling in his gut. A second later it raised an arm. Ethan lunged, grabbing the sheriff by the collar and hauling him backward just as a blast of searing blue light tore through the space where they'd been crouched. The pavement cracked, steam rising from the molten wound in the ground. Davis cursed, scrambling behind the truck as Ethan pulled him into the alley. "They saw us," Davis hissed, breathing hard. "No kidding." Ethan took a measured breath. "They're not here to talk." Across the street, the creatures moved with calculated efficiency, sweeping doorways, pulling people into the open. The air hummed with some unseen force, a frequency Ethan could feel in his teeth. The civilians didn't resist, too stunned, too afraid. A metallic voice crackled through the air, vibrating through his skull. The words were alien, but the intent was clear. Submission. Compliance. Order. Asterisk asterisk. Ethan gritted his teeth. He had heard that tone before from men who thought power was the same as control. Davis peeked around the corner. "They're taking people. Rounding them up." Ethan glanced at the trembling townsfolk being forced toward the school gym. A containment zone. Strategic. Efficient. The aliens weren't killing indiscriminately. Not yet. Why? Davis muttered, thinking out loud. "They want something." Ethan nodded, watching as one of the creatures held up a small device. A holographic display flickered to life, filled with shifting glyphs. The thing tilted its head, scanning the crowd as though searching for something specific. Jonah was in that crowd, face pale, eyes darting. A few other men Ethan knew, ranchers, mechanics, fathers, stood frozen, waiting for a command they didn't understand. Ethan's stomach twisted. He could do something. He could put a round through that alien's head, drop it before it even knew what hit it. But then what? They were outnumbered, outgunned. One shot would turn that quiet tension into bloodshed. He had seen that mistake made before. Davis shifted beside him, tense. "We can't just sit here." Ethan scanned the rooftops, the alleyways, the hidden corners where the town's natural defenses might lie. They needed information. Weapons. A plan. He swallowed the instinct to fight head-on. This wasn't war, not yet. "We wait," he said. Davis shot him a look, but Ethan didn't waver. He knew the sheriff wanted to charge in to protect his people. But protection didn't mean dying for nothing. They stayed low, moving through the back streets, staying out of sight. The invaders operated with terrifying precision, their patrols cutting off every exit. The town was a snare and the noose was tightening. The old radio tower sat on the outskirts just past the tree line. Ethan led Davis through the woods, careful to mask their tracks. The forest should have been alive with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. Instead it was silent. They reached the tower, crouching low in the shadows. The door was ajar, the chain lock snapped. Ethan signaled for silence, then eased inside. The air smelled of ozone like after a lightning strike. Equipment lay in disarray, screens dark, wires severed. Someone had been here. Movement. Ethan spun, rifle raised. Jonah. The mechanic nearly collapsed against the far console, breathing raggedly. His overalls were torn, blood smeared across his temple. He looked up, relief flooding his face. "Jesus, Cole," he whispered. "Thought you were one of them." Ethan lowered his rifle, scanning the room. "You get a good look at them?" Jonah swallowed, nodding. "Yeah. And I heard some of their chatter." He motioned to a broken transmitter. "I don't know how, but I understood some of it." Davis frowned. "You understood their language?" Jonah shook his head. "Not exactly. More like, I felt it. Like it was inside my skull, trying to pull meaning straight from my brain." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What did you hear?" "They're looking for something," Jonah whispered. "Not just resources. Not just land. Something underground. Something they need." Ethan exhaled slowly. That made sense. The way they moved, the way they scanned the crowd, it wasn't just an invasion. It was a search. Davis clenched his jaw. What the hell's under this town that they'd come all this way for? Jonah hesitated. The old reservoir. The one the mining company abandoned years ago. The water's got high mineral content. Locals always joked it could rust a truck in a week. Ethan frowned. "And you think that's what they want?" Jonah wiped sweat from his brow. "I don't know. But I heard one of them say something about extraction. Whatever's down there, they're willing to kill for it." A sudden pulse of energy rolled through the air, sending a static charge through Ethan's skin. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps outside. Jonah paled. They tracked me. Ethan moved fast, killing the light from a nearby console. Davis pressed against the doorframe, gun steady. The alien outside moved with calculated grace, its armor shifting with a soft metallic hiss. It paused, head tilting. Ethan slowed his breathing. Don't move. Don't breathe too hard. Asterisk asterisk. The thing took another step forward, scanning the darkness. Its hand twitched near its weapon. Then a voice, low and grinding like metal tearing. Another one was coming. Ethan's fingers tightened on the trigger. He counted heartbeats. If they had to fight, it had to be fast, controlled. The first alien made a sharp clicking sound. The second responded in kind. Then, without warning, they turned and left. Ethan waited several long seconds before easing out a breath. Davis shot Jonah a glare. You sure they tracked you? Jonah looked just as stunned. They should have. I thought for sure. He swallowed. They're not looking for us. Ethan considered that. If they were only securing the town, they would have moved building by building. But they were hunting something more specific. That meant they had time. Not much, but enough. He looked at Davis and Jonah, his voice calm, steady. We need to hit back. Davis nodded. Where do we start? Ethan glanced toward the dark horizon. We get to the reservoir before they do. The three men moved through the forest with careful, measured steps. The air felt heavier now, thick with something unnatural. Ethan kept his rifle close, ears tuned to the silence. In war, silence was a lie. It always meant something worse was coming. Jonah wiped sweat from his brow. You sure about this? Ethan didn't answer right away. He had no guarantees, only instincts honed by years of knowing when the enemy was moving before they even knew it themselves. If they want what's under the reservoir, we need to get there first. Davis exhaled through his nose, keeping pace. You got a plan for when we do? Yeah, Ethan said. Figure out what they're after. Make sure they don't get it. The land sloped downward as they neared the old reservoir. It had been abandoned years ago, left to stagnate under layers of bureaucracy and rusted fencing. Locals knew better than to drink from it, but nobody had ever bothered draining it completely. It sat like a forgotten relic, a body of water that had outlived its usefulness. Except now, someone wanted it badly enough to invade an entire town. Ethan crouched at the edge of a ridge overlooking the basin. The water, black and still under the night sky, shimmered in an unnatural way. A faint glow pulsed beneath the surface, rhythmic, like something breathing. Jonah swallowed hard. That's new. Davis adjusted his grip on his pistol. They know about it too. Bet they're already on their way. Ethan scanned the perimeter. The fence surrounding the reservoir had been crushed in several places, metal twisted inward. Something had forced its way through. Or out. Movement. He raised a fist, signaling silence. Down by the water, a patrol of aliens moved with purpose, scanning the shore with handheld devices that emitted a dull hum. Their armor caught the moonlight, slick and unnatural, shifting as they walked. Ethan counted 5. Too many to take in a straight fight, not without better firepower. Jonah whispered, What the hell are they looking for? Ethan studied the water. That glow wasn't natural. It wasn't bioluminescence or some trick of the light. It was controlled. Deliberate. Something was down there. Davis exhaled sharply. We're out of time. Ethan nodded. We split up. Davis, circle around and see if you can get close without being spotted. Jonah, you stay here and... A high-pitched whine split the air. The aliens froze, turning toward the trees with inhuman precision. Then came the second noise, low, grinding like metal being pulled apart. The sound sent ice through Ethan's veins. They weren't alone. From the far side of the reservoir, something else was emerging from the water. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle. Move. Now. Davis took off, keeping low as he slipped through the brush. Jonah hesitated, eyes wide, but Ethan didn't give him time to freeze. He yanked the mechanic down behind a fallen tree just as the first figures pulled themselves from the reservoir. They weren't Zelvor. The things that rose from the depths were taller, leaner, their bodies a fusion of organic and metallic plating. Their limbs moved with an unnatural fluidity, long fingers ending in sharp points that flexed like blades. Their faces were unreadable, smooth, eyeless plates with no mouths, only slits where air hissed through like steam. Jonah cursed under his breath. What the hell are those? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know. The Zelvor patrols turned their weapons toward the newcomers, their stances shifting from control to wariness. Whatever these things were, the invaders hadn't been expecting them either. The tallest of the creatures stepped forward, tilting its head toward the Zelvor commander. A clicking sound filled the air, sharp and mechanical. Then all at once violence. The first shot cracked through the night, and the reservoir erupted into chaos. The Zelvor opened fire, their weapons spitting arcs of blue energy. The creatures moved fast, **2*** fast, dodging and weaving with a grace that defied physics. They closed the distance in seconds, cutting through the Zelvor with bladed limbs that tore through armor like it was paper. Ethan watched as one of the Zelvor was lifted into the air, its throat sliced open in a single fluid motion. Another was impaled through the chest before it could react. Jonah recoiled. Jesus Christ. Stay down, Ethan ordered. Davis had made it to the other side of the basin, crouched near a wrecked maintenance shack. He met Ethan's gaze across the chaos, shaking his head. No clean shot. Ethan assessed the battle with sharp precision. The Zelvor had better weapons, but these things were faster, more lethal up close. Which meant one thing. The Zelvor weren't the top predators here. The realization settled cold and hard in Ethan's chest. This wasn't just an invasion. This was a war between something bigger than them, and their town had been caught in the middle of it. Jonah grabbed his arm. We need to get the hell out of here. Ethan kept watching. Not yet. The last of the Zelvor patrol fell, its body crumpling into the dirt. The eyeless creatures stood still for a moment, heads tilting as if listening to something unheard. Then as one they turned toward the town. Ethan's stomach dropped. Davis swore. They're moving. Jonah's breathing turned shallow. If those things make it to Main Street, Ethan already knew. The Zelvor had been precise, methodical in their takeover. These things weren't. These things didn't leave survivors. He clenched his jaw. No more waiting. Back to town, Ethan said. Now. Ethan moved fast, leading Jonah and Davis through the trees with the efficiency of a man who had spent his life navigating battlefields. The earth felt different beneath his boots, charged with something he couldn't name. Behind them, the things from the reservoir moved in eerie silence, gliding over the terrain as if gravity had no claim on them. They weren't chasing, not yet, but they were heading for the town. Ethan wasn't about to let them get there. Davis kept pace, breathing hard but steady. We have to warn them. Ethan adjusted his rifle as they broke into a clearing. Won't matter if we don't stop this first. Jonah ran a few steps behind, panting. How the hell do we stop something we don't understand? Ethan had spent his life fighting enemies he didn't fully understand. The trick wasn't knowing what they were, it was knowing how they could be killed. He replayed the fight at the reservoir, cataloging every detail. The Zelvor's weapons had slowed them down but hadn't stopped them. Speed was their advantage, but armor wasn't impenetrable. Precision mattered. Davis pointed ahead. Church steeple still standing. We can use it for a vantage point. It was a solid plan. High ground meant sightlines. Sightlines meant control. They pushed through the back streets, moving through shadows, avoiding the main road where patrols still stalked. The town was in a stranglehold, Zelvor guarding their prisoners, the other creatures closing in, the humans stuck in the middle of something far beyond them. Ethan pressed against a brick wall, scanning the gymnasium where the townsfolk were being held. The Zelvor hadn't slaughtered them, but that mercy wouldn't last. Jonah clenched his fists. What are they waiting for? Ethan exhaled through his nose. Whatever's in that reservoir, they need it. They wouldn't waste time taking prisoners otherwise. Davis gritted his teeth. Then we make sure they don't get it. They moved fast. The church was old, solid, its bell tower sturdy enough to handle a rifle's recoil. Ethan climbed the narrow wooden steps, settling into position as Davis kept watch below. Jonah crouched behind a pew, gripping a scavenged Zelvor weapon he barely understood. The first of the creatures entered town, their movements impossibly smooth, bodies shifting like liquid metal. Ethan steadied his breath. He took the first shot. The bullet cracked through the night, punching into the nearest creature's neck. It staggered, its body convulsing like a glitch in reality before collapsing. The others stopped. No screaming. No chaos. Just stillness. Then as one they turned their heads toward the tower. Ethan didn't wait. He fired again, adjusting for movement, putting another round through the head of the next one. It dropped. Killable, that was all that mattered. But now they knew where he was. Jonah cursed as the creatures moved, not ran, ***moved ***. 1 second they were on the ground, the next they were climbing the church walls, their fingers sinking into brick like it was soft clay. Ethan grabbed his rifle and bolted. Time to go. The wood behind him splintered as a blade-tipped limb speared through the bell tower, missing him by inches. Davis fired from below, trying to slow them down. Jonah let loose with the stolen alien weapon, its unfamiliar energy blast scorching a hole through one of their torsos. The creature collapsed in a twitching heap. But more were coming. They sprinted through the alleyways, cutting toward the gym. The Zelvor had noticed the fight, their soldiers shifting formation, uncertain. Good. Confusion was an advantage. Ethan didn't hesitate. He shot the nearest Zelvor commander between the eyes. The alien crumpled, and suddenly, everything unraveled. The Zelvor faltered, the chain of command breaking. Prisoners saw their chance. Chaos exploded inside the gym. Davis fired into the mass of confusion, covering as men from the town fought back. Ranchers, mechanics, men who had never been soldiers but understood survival. They tore into their captors with fists, with makeshift weapons, with sheer desperate fury. Ethan grabbed Jonah by the arm. Get them moving. Jonah stumbled forward, yelling for people to run, to scatter, to get to cover. The battle had shifted, but the creatures from the reservoir were still coming. Ethan needed an endgame. His gaze snapped to the command node, the alien structure pulsing in the middle of the street, feeding information back to the mothership. Everything the Zelvor did was controlled. If they lost that link... Davis. Ethan pointed. The sheriff understood immediately. Cover me. Davis sprinted toward the node as Ethan laid down, suppressing fire, dropping anything that moved. Jonah helped get civilians clear, firing wildly when something got too close. Davis reached the node, pulling a handful of scavenged explosives from his belt. He worked fast, placing charges against the alien metal. One of the creatures from the reservoir saw him. It moved faster than anything had a right to move. Ethan didn't think. He fired. The bullet caught it mid-leap. It slammed into the pavement just short of Davis. Davis flicked the detonator switch. Fire in the hole. The explosion sent a shockwave through the street, tearing the command node apart in a surge of blue fire. The Zelvor froze, their link to the mothership severed. Then one by one they collapsed. The creatures from the reservoir reacted differently. They shrieked, a high metallic sound, and fled, not mindless animals. Not unkillable monsters. Something else entirely. The battle was over. Ethan exhaled, scanning the wreckage, the bodies, the people still standing. They had survived. But the town was broken. And this wasn't the end. Davis limped over, bleeding but upright. They'll come back. Ethan nodded. Yeah. Jonah swallowed hard. What do we do? Ethan looked at the sky, where the mothership had once loomed, now nothing but empty space. We get ready.